I'm also chairing the AIIHPC reference group on education and training in palliative care, and was invited to be a partner in the Erasmus Plus funded EduPal project, which is hosting today's meeting. I will be your moderator for this online session for the next 60, hopefully, minutes. The topic today is about novel teaching methods for palliative care education within this project, undergraduate education in palliative care, the EduPal experience. Today we have speakers from Canada, Spain, Germany, Uganda, and Scotland, respectively, which may promise an interesting kaleidoscope of palliative care teaching experiences. Before we start with the speakers, I would like to make some announcements. In this webinar on the screen at the bottom, there is a question and answer section where you can write your questions. Any one of the speakers, of course, only these who are not talking with their presentation, any one of these speakers will be able to answer these questions. After the webinar, in the same browser, there will be a pop-up of a feedback survey, and we kindly ask you to complete it so that we know how you felt about our session. And you already have seen, this is my third announcement, which I would like to make, the EduPal article headline. This was the first slide in the beginning, and just mention that it is still an open access. So if you want to get some deeper information, more details about the EduPal project, this is your chance. So now I would like to start with the session. The first speaker is Jose Pereira. He is a full professor and director of the Division of Palliative Care in the Department of Family Medicine at the McMaster University in Hamilton, Canada. Everybody knows where Hamilton is. I don't know, but it's near Toronto, for those who do not know this. Pivoting to virtual learning in Canada is the title of Jose's talk today, and we decided to give him a bit more space than the rest of us. So Jose has 20 minutes, and the rest of us will divide the rest of time. So Jose, I would like you to start now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Frank, and thank you to the organizers. It's fantastic to be part of a European exercise, since I'm also European, of Portuguese background. I'm going to try share my screen now. So a few prayers to make sure that it all works. And let me know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, fantastic. So I was asked to speak about virtual learning and our experiences in Canada. There are many different terms for virtual learning. There are different definitions for virtual learning, and sometimes it's used interchangeably with e-learning. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'll be using them interchangeably, although some purists will say that I shouldn't be doing that. And what I was hoping to do today is to share with you what we've learned about e-learning in palliative care. And in a way, it's a journey of 20 years in 20 minutes, because we started looking at e-learning back in 1997, 98, and really got into it in about 99, 2000. So I'm going to share with you some of the stories and some of the experiences that we've gained over 20 years with different projects. So I'm going to start off first with some main messages, and then we're going to go to the journey starting from now and then going back 20 years and then coming back to now, and then end off with some take-home messages. So the main messages, and this for the context of the presentation, is that there are many different learning methods, and all of them have got their strengths and limitations. And that's everything from classroom learning, and within classroom learning, there's a whole plethora of methods, as we all know, right? Lectures, workshops, tutorials, simulations, simulated patients, etc. And then in the area of e-learning, again, many different platforms and many different approaches that one can use. And I think it's extremely important that one selects the methods very wisely. And that selection is largely based on a few factors, I would argue. One of them are the competencies at hand. and the learning objectives that go along with them, the opportunities, because sometimes an opportunity arises in a curriculum where one might end up having to use a teaching method that one might not be acquainted with, or that one doesn't think is optimal, but that's what one has. And so you've got to grab the opportunity. And then obviously the resources at hand. In Canada, we've learned that we've got to be extremely flexible, and it's very, very difficult to create a standardized program. We have 17 medical schools, and they all have different curricula. Some are case-based learning curricula, some are problem-based or PBL curricula, some are blends of the two, some of them are blends of PBL and more traditional methods. Some of them are largely, although less so, more the traditional approaches. And they're all changing all the time. And so it's very difficult to come up with one standardized curriculum. So our approach has been developing different products that different schools can use and integrate within their specific curriculum, whatever it looks like, and the opportunities within that curriculum. So I'll share with you some of that shortly. As I said before, one's got to be very opportunistic, at least in Canada. Sometimes opportunities open up in a course on care of the elderly or geriatrics. Sometimes it's an opportunity on communication. Sometimes it's an opportunity about congestive heart failure. So one has to continue to be on the lookout for these opportunities and continually developing relationships with the different leads in all these different courses so that we're able to try and get into the curricula at different points. We've also learned that it's extremely important to integrate palliative care education right across the learning journey, from the preclinical years into the clinical years. In Canada, the medical school is 4 years. McMaster, actually, ours is a 3-year, but it's very intense 3 years. People have to have done another degree before they enter medicine. And then they have to do a residency, which can go anything from 2 to 5 years. So it ends up very much like in Europe, where it's about 6 to 8 and 10 years of education. Lastly, I want to stress how, in our experience, one way in which we've started integrating more, and there's still a long way to go. I can tell you now, there's lots of gaps still in Canada. There was a paper recently published by Bruno Gagnon, a colleague, and other colleagues by the Canadian Society of Palliative Care Physicians, that highlights the gaps in clinical training in many of the medical schools. So we still have a long way to go. But palliative care can be like, I call it the Swiss Army knife of medical education, because it's got value added. It's not just about palliative care. And the value added that it brings to medical education, and a point that we make very often to deans and vice deans in charge of this, is that it also brings competencies like compassion, empathy, teamwork, interprofessional work, holistic care, person-centered care, etc. We've learned that in terms of looking at virtual learning, as I said, there are many different formats and approaches, from self-learning modules to webinars, asynchronous discussions and simulations, videos, etc. And AI, or artificial intelligence, now is beginning to have an impact, where you can now set up these learning environments that you can actually interact with. And there's some people doing amazing work on communication training using these artificial learning environments motored by artificial intelligence. Virtual learning can stand alone, or it can also be combined with classroom learning. So you've got the approaches, the hybrid or the flipped, and some people use these two interchangeably. I tend to use the term hybrid for a course where there is both online and classroom, so real presence, and where the two, although maybe in the same course, are not necessarily connected. For example, you can do in the classroom, you can do modules on symptom management and communication. On the online, you can do some modules on delirium and decision making, for example. Whereas in flipped learning, usually there's a very tight connection. So I'm going to share with you examples that we use where in flipped learning, um, the we've introduced learners to some basic concepts using self-learning online modules, and then they apply that in the classroom or in webinars using case-based webinars. So now let's look at the current. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, like the rest of the world, we had to change very quickly. So we closed down across Canada in mid-March. And so in the medical schools, the undergraduate training, which as I said is usually 4 years, and then the postgraduate training, which can be 2 to 5 years, we had to basically pivot everything to virtual, like everyone else I think in the world had to do. In Canada, all the clinical rotations stopped in the undergraduate curriculum. And in the postgraduate curriculum, they were reduced a lot. So we're still facing, with partial lockdown, the challenge of how do we get the learners to see clinical cases. And so what's beginning to appear is students being connected with real patients virtually to do their history taking and learn the art of doing virtual care and understanding when it's appropriate and when it's absolutely not appropriate. We also had to do a lot of pivoting around continuing professional development. So this is CPD for healthcare professionals already in practice. And so I'm going to be talking about Palliative Canada as well, where I'm scientific officer. It's a non-profit organization that was established in 2000 to promote the palliative care approach. Almost all our, not all our courses, but most of our courses were classroom.
As we celebrate 30 years.
Okay, someone's celebrating 30 years. Fantastic. At McMaster University, we've moved to using the Palliative Leap online courses. And so the students are now being asked to study those through self-learning. And we're in the process of developing case-based or problem-based webinars to then apply what they learned in the virtual, still using virtual format, but using cases. This is a busy slide. We've written about it actually quite recently. You can look it up. It's free. The paper's available for free on Journal of Palliative Medicine, published in the last few weeks actually as well. And it's our curriculum framework on how we've developed the LEAP courses. So LEAP stands for Learning Essential Approaches to Palliative Care. And we've got different versions. We've discovered over the years that you need to, and this is very aligned with adult learning principles, the material has to resonate with the learner. So when we were taking our general LEAP course, most of these courses, by the way, are 1 or 2 days, and they cover the various aspects of a palliative care approach, from symptom management to psychological distress, spiritual distress, etc., and communication. When we took the LEAP core into hospitals and to nephrologists, for example, or cardiologists, those cases did not resonate with them. And so we developed these different versions to address different specialty areas and also different settings of care. There are about 18 now. So there's a LEAP long-term care for long-term care nursing homes. There's a LEAP oncology, LEAP emergency, and we've had interesting uptake with the LEAP paramedics. It's gone across the country, where most of the provinces now in Canada are training their emergency staff, so the emergency response teams, the ambulance people, the paramedics, on how to provide a palliative care approach, which has proved very useful with the pandemic, when they've got these skills that they can respond very rapidly to someone experiencing problems. We've done these courses across the country. This is a map of Canada where all the courses has been held. In 2019, there were 430 courses held, and they're all interprofessional. And they're limited to 30 learners. And often there are learners, medical students and residents, that are integrated in these courses. You may ask yourself, why is it mainly in the south of the country? Well, that's where most of the people live. But we do have some done way up in the north in the Arctic, or close to the Arctic. We have over the years been using virtual learning. So the LEAP paramedics, for example, we've got 3 versions. There's one version that's fully classroom, one that's flipped, where people learn the concepts first and then apply it in a half-day face-to-face program. And then there's a fully online version, which has been very useful in provinces like British Columbia, which are massive. The geography is massive, and it's very difficult to bring people together regularly to learn together in the classroom. Our LEAP Pediatrics and LEAP Train the Trainer program have also been hybrid and flipped learning for a while. Our LEAP Online, which we are now using a lot with the medical students during this virtual switchover pivoting, consists of 15 online self-learning modules. Each one takes about 10 to 30 minutes long. And there's interactivity, quizzes, and polls, and you can even break them up into smaller pieces. So they learn the basic concepts in these modules, and then we do the live webinars. And these are case-based learning. They're all cases, and we apply the cases with different professions learning at the same time, including we now bring in students, medical students into that as well. And the lessons learned so far is virtual learning cannot replace the richness of bedside clinical learning. That's for me is a key message. There is a place for virtual learning, but we've got to be very cautious if we're thinking that it's going to replace the wonderful experiential learning that is there to be had. Hybrid or flipped learning approaches can be helpful in certain situations. We are finding it's helpful to introduce learners to some of these basic concepts and then applying them in either at the bedside or case-based webinars or classroom that are problem-based learning or case-based learning approaches. Palliative Canada's got a few other learning aids, which we won't go into. They're short little videos of 1 to 3 minutes embedded within these online courses, or they're self-standing. We sometimes use them to trigger a learning experience. Now let's go quickly back in a few short minutes of the journey over the last 20 years and the lessons learned. So for me, the journey actually started back in 1998 when I worked with pharmacology colleagues to develop a palliative care pain course online for pharmacy students. And the method we used there was discussion boards, so asynchronous discussion boards, discussion forums. And we had one forum was on cases, another one was on reading material. And my personal learning from that was there was richness, but it was very resource intensive. It required a lot of time by the teachers to be going on 2 or 3 times a day and responding, and for learners as well. So I don't think for a large scale program, it's very useful. It's okay for a master's degree or a PhD, I think, or a very specific course. But for a large scale course, I think that these asynchronous discussion forum approaches of learning can be inefficient. Then we did the PalCare EdNet program, and this is for rural healthcare professionals and rural students in Alberta. This is back in 2000. Again, we used asynchronous discussions. We learned that the technology can help overcome geographical barriers. But at the time, you can imagine the technology was not very user-friendly. So we really struggled to get it going. We also learned an interesting thing, and this was a quick story. I was trying to integrate palliative care in the curriculum of the University of Calgary many years ago. And I approached the vice dean for the undergraduate curriculum saying, look, we've got to get palliative care into this. And he said to me, Jose, you know, it's like asking a penguin to get a penguin onto an ice floe that is already full of penguins. Now, penguins are not to be found in the Arctic, as you know, so we don't have penguins in Canada. So the analogy was a bit funny and a bit strange. But anyway, the point was the curricula are already very, very full. And so trying to get something else like palliative care into it means something else often has to go. So you have to find ways of integrating it. And he taught me, this vice dean was an incredible teacher, and he taught me the 3 things of curriculum development, the 3 Ps. The first P is pedagogy, the second P is practicalities, and the third is politics. So never underestimate the politics in curriculum development. We then did from 2002 to about 2007, we developed a course for rural residents, and it was a hybrid program. That course has continued. So still today, they are doing this hybrid program, although more of it is in face-to-face. But there were different things, we had different models as we developed them over the years. And we incorporated face-to-face learning using the LEAP courses, the LEAP modules, with web-based learning. And the web-based learning was a combination of case discussions, the asynchronous discussions, and what we call synchronous, now it's usually referred to as webinars, and then independent self-learning. And we learned from these that it can make a difference. You can change knowledge attitudes and comfort levels, but you do need that face-to-face with simulations or OSCEs, objective encounters, and simulated patients to learn the skills, the motor skills. We did a project as well starting in 2003 called the AIIHPC project, where we got funding from the government to put in place curriculum in the 17 medical schools. The big lesson learned was the importance of competency mapping, which I think you've done already. We've learned that it can change knowledge and attitudes. This is a project I was involved with in Switzerland in 2008, where we mapped out the curriculum across the 5 medical schools. And as you can see in the diagram, we compared it to the standards at the time in 2007 of the AIIHPC, and there was lots missing. And one of the big concerns was there was lots of learning early, but very little in the clinical years. So be aware of that. So now to finish up, back at McMaster. So learning to go virtual, we're discovering is this whole new world. We're having to learn to learn with virtual patients. There are now methods where you've got patients with chronic illnesses who are willing to work with residents and students, where students can contact them. It's all worked through the university on a regular basis, and they learn to do history taking with these patients with chronic stable diseases. Then there's also the patients where we as clinicians have to go and see them for the first time or assess them. And how do you do that virtually, and how do you bring in a student at the same time? We're learning that we have to learn about digital professionalism. Think about what you're going to say and what you're going to do, how you're going to dress, privacy controls, know your platform and functions. And I think we can all give examples of how we've appeared with pajamas on, not knowing that we were live. So again, the main message, just to finish up, is that different schools often have different curricula, and we need to be flexible. We need to be opportunistic to find those opportunities in the different schools that let us in, where political doors open up for us and where practical doors open up for us. We've got to integrate it across the whole learning journey, preclinical and clinical. And lastly, in terms of virtual learning, there's many different methods we can use. I like the hybrid and flipped approach. We've got to choose them wisely. And virtual learning, we feel after all these years, the point I really want to make is that virtual learning has got a place, but it should not replace experiential learning and experiential rotations. Thank you very much. And I want to finish off with an African proverb, having spent half of my life in Africa. If you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel far, travel together. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you. You kept exactly the time you got, 20 minutes. Wonderful. Thank you. And I would like to suggest that questions into more detail could be asked by the question and answer section in a written form, so that we could go on with this session now. And I'm very thankful that you were addressing the terminology of all these digital, virtual, blah, blah things, because I'm always confused when using these words, and I'm really not sure if I'm right when I use them. And so it was giving me a relaxation to feel free to use these. The trigger videos that you addressed, are they for free? Can anyone use them?
Yeah, so some of them are for free. So if you go to the website for Pallium Canada, www.pallium.ca, and you look up under resources, there are some for free. So the one that used a lot is one called Better Early Than Late. It's only about 3 minutes long, and it's all about starting palliative care much earlier. And we sometimes show that video and then spend the next half an hour speaking to students or learners. So it becomes a trigger to learning. There are a few there that you can find there. The communication videos are not. So we use communication videos, and there's two different methods. One we call the not quite right, and the other one is the better. So it's like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The not quite right format is, they're all short. They're about 2 to 3 minutes long, sometimes even shorter. And they show an interaction between a clinician and a patient or a family member. And the not quite right means that there's some things that are good, but other things that are not quite good. And the idea is that the learner will say, not bad, but there's something about it that's not quite right. So that's why we call it not quite right. And we think that it gets the cognitive processes active more than if you just show a video that shows terrible behavior or fantastic behavior.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce the next speaker, but I'm not sure if he's really present in this session. Antonio. Antonio is not here. Antonio.
So I think continue with Moira, no?
Antonio is with Moira. Confusing me. I don't know what you mean. But Jose, you said that you could also take over the part of Antonio. Antonio Nogueira, professor at the Atlantis Research Program at the Institute for Culture and Society of the University of Navarra, now recently changed to a new job in Madrid, wanted to speak about visual art in teaching. And Jose, you said that you could also talk a bit about this topic instead of Antonio.
I could say, sure, I'll keep it short, 4 or 5 minutes. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, would be nice,
Okay, so I can talk about it because I designed the course with Antonio and with Carlos Centeno. So I'm a visiting professor at University of Navarra. So about 5 years ago, we asked the question, how can we use palliative care as a platform to teach about the art of being a doctor? And so we said, well, the art of being a doctor, sometimes it's the decision making. It's seeing the person as a whole person. And all these different factors you've got to think about when you're making a decision. What's the role of dialysis? Do you do chemotherapy or not? These communication pieces. And then we said, well, okay, we've got to change the attitudes and change the way people think as well. So one way to do that is to use the arts. So there's a fantastic literature base around using humanities. So literature, the movies. In this case, we chose to use the art. And in Pamplona, in Spain, the University of Navarra has got a fantastic modern art museum, fantastic museum. So we designed a course that was for medical students from their 2nd year to their 6th year. About 30 students. Every year, the number's gone up. So the last course we did before the shutdown, we had 60 students. And it's become a very popular course. And we were able to bring the students together where the senior ones are sharing with the junior ones their clinical experiences, and the junior ones are sharing with the senior ones the basic pharmacology, anatomy that they're learning and bringing them together. But what's unique about it is it's a week-long course. It's 5 hours, 4.5, 5 hours every day for about 6 days. And we start off by meeting at the art museum, at the art gallery. And we work closely with the art curator, and we identify pictures or sculptures or displays that get us thinking. And the idea is that we start off each session with the learners going to these different art displays and then exploring them and asking themselves what they're seeing. And what they learn is that people are seeing different things, the same thing in different ways, and are interpreting the same thing in different ways. And as you start thinking, as the days go by, you start looking for different things, and you start seeing things that you would not have seen elsewhere. So you start changing how you approach things, and you start also developing this respect for that people have got different ways of seeing things. And so that's the goal of it. And we're able to bring in themes like being in the presence of suffering, companionship, the art of medicine, of being with someone and accompanying them using the arts. So there's a rich base, there's a rich literature and ever-growing literature around the use of humanities and the arts. And that's the course that we developed. We've published that. So if you go to BMC Medical Education, and if you look up Nogueira, Centeno, or Pereira, our paper, and the results of that are described. BMC, medical education.
Thank you, Jose. Very interesting. I never heard about this until several weeks ago when I got a text. Maybe it was this article from Antonio, and I was very impressed. I think it's a kind of meta experience, because I can tell you that you may see things differently than I do, and it's easy. But
exactly.
If you experience this with a medium, which normally you are not dealing with so detailed, then it's different.
Exactly.
And
yeah, you've just summarized it very well, actually. You just summarized beautifully what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. The next speaker is myself, and I would like to talk about practical training that we offer here in Aachen. I also try to give you my presentation on the screen. I hope that, can you see this? Can everybody see this?
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I can see it well.
So I hope everybody and all the others, I think also. Okay. It's a practical training which is called Patients as Teachers. And unfortunately, I did not invent this. I got this idea from a course where I was a participant in 2004. It's called the Harvard program PCEP, Palliative Care, Education and Practice. And there I experienced, I had the opportunity to accompany a young student and the course leader, Susan Block, who were talking about this practical training where one student who came together with one patient, and I adopted this idea here and tried to introduce this in Aachen. And here you can have an overview of the typical 6 years of studying medicine at our university, the course of medical studies, where we have mandatory and voluntary parts, and we call this within Germany a model medical education program, because we changed some things from the very beginning onwards. We tried to put together not only basic sciences in terms of theory, but also in terms of the practical use of it. And then the flow of this medical course is that students are getting more and more practical and getting more and more patient contact. And within the 4th year and the 7th semester, we offer palliative medicine as a mandatory subject. And from the 3rd year onwards, medical students can choose this practical training, which we call Patients as Teachers. The problems that we saw and others in literature also was that training favors, I don't know if this term is correct in English, pseudo-sovereignty. It means that people feel a kind of routine which should not be a routine in the end of the studies. And on the other side, students often fear to lose control when talking and being together with a patient, and there is an unspoken denial and kind of taboo of emotions. And so the objectives of this practical training were to gain control without being emotionless in contact with the patient, to get an adequate handling of own emotions. And often students ask us as teachers, are they allowed to cry when being in contact with the patient? And this is a very important question, and we can get nearer to this problem also with this practical training here. And the understanding of the difference between empathy versus sympathy, I think, is also a very important thing. And students learn that empathy can be learned, and sympathy is a kind of emotion which comes, and you can only hardly try to steer this. Here you have a timeline and organizational things and limits of this practical training, Patients as Teachers. First, of course, you have the teacher has to introduce, the university teacher has to introduce this course to the students, and then there's a patient contact for about 20 hours. 1 hour here is 45 minutes as an educational unit. And within 4 to 6 weeks, weeks, the students should have 10 to 25 contacts. You cannot really bring it to a point and say, oh, you have to make 10 contacts or 15, because it depends, of course, on the patient and the trajectory of the patient and how he or she develops within this period of contact. And so if a patient's getting worse and deteriorating, then of course, sometimes you also have to stop this practical training before it should have ended. There is a supervision taking place 3 to 4 times for 2 hours, and during the run of the course, and after the patient and the students have separated and the practical training is finished, there will be a final debriefing to talk about the experiences of the students with the patient. And in the end, when all this has taken place, the students are asked to make a written report. We think that they should need about 20 hours, and they have to write a minimum of 20 pages about their experiences. The idea, and this is different from the Harvard practical training. The idea behind this is that it may deepen the experience that was also discussed in the supervision when they are urged to write down 20 pages. And this is all that we say. 20 pages, maybe more, but we do not talk about the form in which they have to present this written report. So sometimes also the way they create the written report is reflecting a bit of the experience that they had with the patient. And we made a kind of content analysis of written reports again and again, and over all these analyses, we found that there was typical topics coming back again and again, and this was the feeling of insecureness at the first contact with the patient, the appreciation of patient's view and the patient's autonomy, and the enduring of own feelings and the try to get trust, to gain trust with the patient. Nearness, distance, and saying farewell in the end are continuing topics, and this is a very important point, I think, understanding of one's own role as a physician. I have only 2 minutes left, I see. I have just taken out of the written report some examples to underpin the experience that the students had. For instance, here, I felt sorry for him because I understood the importance of driving a car for him. Maybe I was the only one around him who understood that. Because they had a lot of time and contact, they came to things where you as a normal doctor maybe will not come to in a discussion with the patient. And here the patient on the photo, despite these disadvantages, there was nothing more important for E than living alone at home. He didn't mind the mess, the garbage, and the dirt. For me, this experience is impressive, how difficult it can be. On the one hand, to respect a patient's free will and how much strength can be released through this will on the other side. And in terms of the time, I think I cannot read all these quotes here by the students, but maybe I can give you a handout if anyone is interested in this, so that you can read these quotes later on. And to come to my conclusion, and this I think fits into what Jose said, there are a lot of things in these days that you may try be able to teach virtually, but there are some things that should be experienced face to face. And I think here how to deal with death and dying, it's hard to teach, and it's definitely hard to teach virtually. And I think this should be experienced face to face. And what has to be considered when trying also to do this practical training or offer this practical training in your university, you have to tell both sides that there is no healthcare supply mandate for the student. And the focus is only on spending time together and small group reflection and reflection in the written report, I think, is essential. Thank you. So I have to get out of this. Okay. So, okay. Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, that's all I wanted to tell you about this practical training. And if there are any questions by the audience, by the unseen audience, please feel free to write questions in the question and answer section. The next speaker I would like to introduce is Moira Link. She is, I have my paper here, she's working at Makerere University in Uganda in, I don't know how to pronounce this, KRDS, International Palliative Care. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Cardiff. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Moira is going to talk about palliative care in stage, neural pain pathways by drama. Moira, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Frank. And it's just lovely to be part of this session, this webinar, and also just huge congratulations to EduPal for all the work that you've done. It's a fantastic resource. And Dr. Pereira, it's a long time since we've met, and I just loved that summary, and you set the scene beautifully. I'm going to just do a couple of introductory slides and then just share a novel teaching method that we've been using. But I first of all want to say thank you to the medical students I've had the privilege of working with, healthcare students, I should say, not just medical students. And this is from Europe, but also from the Middle East, from Sudan, from Rwanda, from Uganda. I find as a medical teacher, I learn so much from the people I interact with. And these are just some of them. And of course, now this is the way we're interacting, and that can be challenging. But this was today 120 students across Asia. And we had a fantastic discussion about communication in palliative care. So my thank you to those who I've been able to learn from over 30 years, but also interact with. And I really want to emphasize the point that was made earlier, that I love that idea of a Swiss Army knife. I've not heard that before, but that palliative care is a vehicle by which we can touch on so many important issues in healthcare, and maybe even in humanity, as I think was touched on in the talking about using the visual arts. I also think it's an important medium for something called transformative education. I think you'll be familiar with this, that the idea that through education, we don't just teach knowledge and skills, but we're doing something with this deeper values-based understanding. We're allowing that to be challenged. We're looking at how that influences our practice, our beliefs. And palliative care, I think, gives us a fabulous opportunity to do that. It immediately takes us into issues of complexity, vulnerability, compassion, empathy, we just heard, teamwork, helplessness and success, and what failure means. All of these things are encapsulated in core palliative care teaching. And therefore we have an immense opportunity and also responsibility to think of how we operate at a values base. And I'm aware that many of you on this call are experts at doing that already. We're also familiar, I think, with educational theory. Here's just one, the experiential learning cycle. These are all useful tools to help us understand how to design curriculums, how to assess curriculums. And I think Dr. Pereira has already explained that extremely nicely. But what the challenge I think we sometimes have is how do we link those things together? How do we link the active experimentation stage into the reflective observation, and how do we assess that? And of course, traditionally medical education tended to stick in the abstract. These are theories, we can get caught up in them. This is just a cartoon suggesting, you know, that we can't say to someone, I learn like this, therefore that's the only way I'm going to learn. There's simply ways in which we can understand our audience, if you like, and help them in their learning process. And so I want to just talk about one tool, and that is the use of drama. Now, I'm going to mention just 3 settings where we've used it. Sculpting, first of all, just to touch on that, and then come on to the topic that I think Tanya particularly wanted me to mention. It's a very profound thing to use your body in a situation. We do it in role play to some extent, and we set the scene and so on. But I think many of you will have used a tool called sculpting, where you actually use the physicality of the people in the room to illustrate the situation that you're wanting to discuss or to explore. Here's one example we've used in a pediatric palliative care curriculum, where volunteers are given roles of a complex family and interaction that involves a child, involves the clinical team. People place themselves where they feel most comfortable in the scenario. So you might say the child is here. Place yourselves where you think you ought to be in the scenario with the role you've been given. And then of course you change the scenario and people move. It's fascinating to watch what happens. This is quite a quiet, quite a reflective tool, and it can stir up quite deep emotions, as you can see how families get squashed out, how children are not communicated with. And we have to use this tool with care, but it can be very powerful. Here's another way we've used this tool, again, a quiet reflective drama, but in this time we actually identify each person in the role with a pair of shoes, and someone steps forward to give testimony. I'm Ahmed, I'm 6 years old, I love to play football, I'm sick, nobody will talk to me, and you put the shoes down. And you do that for every role in the scenario. And then again, the group is allowed to move the shoes in response to changes that you give in the scenario. This can be extremely powerful to look at in a bereavement scenario where you take out the person who has died and then everybody else starts struggling to find their roles or having divided loyalties and differing responses to that grief. But let me come on to the topic that Tanya wanted me to mention. That's partly because I think she was there in Uganda. Now, I had a challenge. I was teaching a multidisciplinary audience, undergraduate palliative care BSc program, and I was struggling to get people who'd not done neurophysiology to connect with complex pain, particularly neuropathways. And I was aware that most of the time, particularly those of us who are doctors, tend to teach this in quite an academic way. Neurophysiology pathways like this, which although pictorial, are still very much reflecting our neurophysiological training ourselves. And I decided to try and introduce something that was very culturally normal. This was an African culture, so we substituted the nociceptive impulse with drums. We got people to dress up. I gave them things to dress up with, and they chose how they could identify themselves as a dorsal root ganglion, or as a dorsal horn cell, or as the brain. They always pick the most senior person in the room to be the brain. And then we had the impulses going up and down that dramatic pathway, with the drums as the stimulus. And then the drums, of course, get faster and faster. We start mimicking, pulling in other areas of peripheral sensitization, dorsal horn upregulation. We're trying to mimic what happens with complex chronic pain and mimic some of the additional factors that come into this, including the higher centers. And finally, we introduce ways to manage that pain, which is people that run and hug a running impulse. Now, I'm describing a drama to you, which is really quite difficult. So I'm going to see, I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to see if we can just watch a tiny bit of one of these episodes happening in practice, just 30 seconds. Secret operative! That last moment in the drama was morphine, finding a rapidly moving pain impulse and hugging them. They're just examples of how we can, and I think the point of bringing in this teaching mode into this discussion is a bit like the last session, the last two sessions. How can we use things that are very different, that will engage different bits of our learning, experiential learning, but will also help embed what we're teaching? And I find students that I've met 10 years ago will tell me that their understanding of complex pain hinges on that, not on the elegant lecture I gave in half an hour before that. And Tammy is one of those. Just as I finish, I want to mention, since we're obviously in a time where we're thinking very much about changing our teaching, it's been a privilege to be involved with a project across India and Southeast Asia. Today we were teaching also from Philippines, Indonesia, and from Africa. If any of you want to know more about that particular COVID-19 low and middle income project, this is a recent article in the Indian Journal of Palliative Care and the website for the free resources. Can I just take one more 30 seconds? We started talking about the human side of medicine. Can I finish by letting the medical students of Gaza have the last word? We do some drama with these students as well. And I've been continually impressed how people in a situation which is quite short on humanitarian, it's a very difficult environment in terms of the humanitarian setting. And yet when we taught these undergraduate students about palliative care, I asked them, what values are you seeing in this? Right back to what Dr. Pereira was saying. What are the values? And look what they're mentioning. Isn't that wonderful? Dignity, compassion, humanity, respect. And one student used a phrase which I've stayed with me, that palliative care represents humanity until infinity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maura, for your very vivid contribution. And you seem to be in this topic with all your heart, I think. Is it the drama, you know Jochen Becker-Ebel in Kerala?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it what he's doing there?
It's different. He's doing something called psychodrama, so that's actually a very nice model as well. That's particularly psychological teaching. I mean, in some ways, the drama that I just described there, a lot of it is about having a whole lot of fun in a culturally appropriate way that anchors learning. So I think you can use drama in very different ways. I just gave some example. Jochen's another example.
Okay. And I was asking myself, in the video, was it slow motion or did they really move like this?
They moved quite a bit faster on the last. That was their trial run, but I don't have a video of the full run. The full run was pretty crazy. I think there was even some chairs knocked over in the excitement.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we are quite good in time, and I would like to introduce our last speaker for today. It's my appreciated colleague Tanya. She's sitting in her office next to me, next to my office, and she's also working in the Department for Palliative Medicine at WTH Aachen University. And she will talk about bus rounds, patients at home. I think it's also quite an interesting project which she did here. Tanya, would you like to start? Tanya, it's your turn. You have to turn on your microphone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thank you very much too for this session and for EduPal, of course. And I want to show, also I'm Tanya Pastrana. Salud. I'm speaking from you, as Frank said, from Germany, and will tell you about another teaching method for palliative care, and this is the bus round. Exactly, in palliative care. We know a lot of, as the palliative care, more and more patients will need palliative care because the demographic and epidemiological transition, and home is the preferred place. Home is the preferred place of care and death of many patients. The medical schools have to respond to this challenge and the needs of the healthcare system, for example, by including palliative care into the curricula, as in Romania are doing. And our requirement is that palliative care, as Jose and Moira said, is a requirement that medical trainees are exposed to the reality in practice and provide access to patients' care in the community. In this context, a new concept comes, and it's the community-based learning approach. This concept is based on the assumption that the profound learning is based on experience and supported by guidance, context provisioning, basic knowledge, and intellectual analysis. The learning's attitudes and skills cannot be transmitted by factual information, And through the direct exposure to the real practice, students will be able to recognize their own limitations during the patient end-of-life care and will be aware of the needs for empathy, respect for the patient. In addition, home is an excellent place for a comprehensive palliative care training, giving the opportunity to learn about the real experience of serious ill patients and their families, as well as the impact of the culture and environment of the healthcare. Here there are some pictures about how different can be home, that they are from Latin America, all of these pictures. Unfortunately, that is not my idea. This is from Jose Pereira and from Eduardo Bruguera that is started back in Edmonton in 1995, and they have already wrote different papers, several papers about the bus runs. I will show you a video about how it works.
Studies have shown nearly 80% of patients want to spend their remaining time at home with family and friends, not in a hospice or hospital. But one of the biggest challenges in the delivery of quality end-of-life care is lack of training for palliative care at home. At MD Anderson, we offer a patient home visits program. It's a unique teaching method for healthcare professionals. Through this intensive patient-based interactive model, medical providers visit homes and other local communities to learn about the challenges patients and their families face at the end of life. On the day of the patient home visits, participants board a bus to travel to the first patient's home. They are then introduced to each other and discuss the patient's history, including their disease, medication, and support system. The MD Anderson faculty member will give information on what to look for during the visit. Is the patient at the center of the household or isolated? Is the home well cared for? How is the family member doing? What is the caregiver situation like? Participants are also able to ask any additional questions prior to meeting the patient. Upon arriving at the patient's home, the host hospice will confirm if the patient is still open to having participants come into their residence. If everyone is not able to come inside, participants can utilize earpieces and radios to hear the discussion and ask questions. The MD Anderson faculty member and host hospice team will conduct a brief visit. The team will cover the main physical and some of the ongoing symptoms of the patient and the caregiver situation. They will also address the patient's function and level of comfort at home. This interaction helps participants become more intimately familiar with the hospice experience and the quality of care it entails. While en route to the next patient's location, the MD Anderson faculty member and the hospice worker will offer additional insight into the visit and give their feedback on the next steps in the patient's care. The second patient visit will also be discussed during the ride. Programs like patient home visits are key to keeping the patient's needs at the forefront of our goal in making cancer history.
How is the in the USA in the Anderson is done? We in Aachen did a little slide change, and we have in the first phase theoretical input with 2 lectures in a standard format about principles of palliative care, and also the different model of care in Germany and the challenge of the provision. That is what in classroom. And in a second stage, we have an immersion phase with a visit to hospice, palliative care units, and home visit with 2 or 3 students, as in a smaller scale, going in a carpool with me and a home care medical doctor. And the students are asked to engage in reflective observation in 3 areas: medical encounter, settings and environment, and symptom management. In a final phase, come a reflection where students share a summary of the home visit in the group and present one aspect of the activity complemented with the literature research and their own reflections. We did a focus group in order to capture the students' perspective in their experience regarding the course, and I show you the key findings of this focus group. The first of one is the authenticity. student says we had an actor pacientes in the blog.
Tanya, the image is blocked, Tanya. We can see just the movie. We don't see your slides.
Wow.
Exit share screen and share again.
Okay, moment. Oh.
There was also a comment from one participant that who said that the video was not moving. I was not sure if there should move a video, but obviously she got the impression, and maybe she was right. So this was also a technical problem, but I don't know how to solve it now.
Well,
so
I can share the link, yeah, with the moment I share again.
But Tanya, you have some more slides. I was thinking that you were just talking now without slides, but if Daniela says you.
Yes.
Yeah. Ah, okay. No.
Yeah. Well, Daniela said this blog, and I changed I have to share again.
Yeah.
May I conclude? Yeah. Well, there are the findings. Is it the authenticity? Can you see it, Frank?
We can see your slide now. It's heading is results, authenticity.
Exactly. And the student said it is never so impressive as meet a patient in the last phase of life in life. And so life, if you meet a patient in her or his own setting, you can better imagine what kind of person they are in their own four walls. Also about the new knowledge and the mystification, students said I had a completely different picture about the hospice, darker and more like a hospital-like. I haven't thought that people have time to talk with the patient, and they had too much as just medical service. They have no concept about, also they understand palliative care, the concept of palliative care in the praxis, and the student says, we will do anything more? No. That is simply too many options that you can do. You still have communicative, but also medications. There is too much to learn. You can see that the patient is much more than these symptoms. And finally, the doctoring as professional model. The student said there are many ways to deal with the situation and to do something good for the patient. Palliative care doctors have a particularly kind way to deal with patients, and I think it's always great to witness. So I like to learn some more tricks. That are some ideas of the students. Finally, I want to say the combination of the community-based learning in outpatient setting and classroom teaching allows the students apply what they learn in a real environment and reflect their experience in the classroom. Without the process of the lecture before and the reflection then, there is a risk that the student do not capture the human aspect of the experience.
You finished, Tanya?
I finished.
Yes, thank you for your contribution. Unfortunately, we had some technical problems, but in the end, I think it came to a good end. And yeah, we have also come to the end of the whole session. There were not so many questions in the question and answer session. I tried much more. They were comments, not really questions. There's some coming up now, but yeah, I cannot answer it at the moment because I would like to say goodbye to all of you who were attending this session. And again, to have one comment on Tanya's talk. Yeah, you are right. It's what Jose said before, and Maura, and also in my talk, we stressed on the fact that it is sometimes, of course, necessary to get a face-to-face experience with patients, especially if they are seriously ill. And I think this is something going through all of our talks, and this is a big take-home message for all of us. So if there's any other of you who wants to make a final comment, that's the chance to do so now. I don't see a willingness of finally saying something. Then again, thank you to all of the speakers, and of course, a big thank you also to the audience, to all these unseen and unknown people. And maybe we will see again in the future. And I wish you a nice evening or day. wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Been an absolute pleasure. And I would just say collaboration is the name of the game. So any ways we can continue to collaborate, be great.
Would love to.
Bye.
Bye-bye.